thanks for having me. I very much miss my South Orange Public Library. That is where I go to work when I'm tired of working here at home. So it's fun to talk, even if just on Zoom. So my new book is called Every Missing Piece. Every Missing Piece is set in North Carolina. It's about a girl named Maddie who's 11 years old, and she is the kind of person who worries about things going wrong, which is something that I worried about a lot when I was a kid. I used to be afraid of weather phenomenon and whether or not there would be bad guys outside or in the bushes, things like that. So Maddie is kind of anxious like that. And she has reason to be. Her father passed away a few years prior in an accident. And so that's kind of spurred all these feelings for her. And in this story, a new boy moves into Maddie's neighborhood, and Maddie becomes convinced that he is actually a child that went missing 6 months earlier. But of course, no one will listen to her because grown-ups don't usually listen to kids. So this book is about whether or not Maddie is right, whether the grown-ups will listen to her, and what is ultimately going on with this child who may or may not be a missing child. This was a fun book to write because it has a really strong mystery storyline. And for me as a reader, I like books that make me want to turn the page to the next chapter. So that was really a goal for me here. It would be good for anyone who's fans of contemporary fiction. If you like works by Rebecca Stead or Erin and Trotta Kelly, you would probably like it. But also if you like mysteries and waiting to find out answers, then you would like it as well. So the inspiration for Every Missing Piece came from a few different things. When you write a book, it's interesting because your brain is just like a little collection basket, right? And you just collect all these things that you're interested in over your lifetime. And when you're writing, a lot of times your subconscious picks out parts of these things and puts them together and makes a story. It can be a very messy and hard process to get through, but that's where the stories come from. So for me, one of those components was as a child wondering about this what if I came across a kid that I thought was a missing child. You know, this was back in the day where we did still have missing children pictures on milk cartons at school. And I used to look at those pictures and really try to put that face in my memory in case I saw that person. And so that was a what if that has been in my head for a very long time. That combined with wanting to write a story about North Carolina, which is where I grew up. Those two things kind of came together, and I wondered what would happen in a community like this if this kind of an issue arose in a close-knit community where everybody kind of knows each other's business. How would they respond to a child coming to them saying, I found a missing kid? And that was an interesting thing for me to explore. I really enjoyed writing about North Carolina. I was there through college. And I grew up running around in the woods and playing in the creek with my dog, which Maddie does a lot of those things in this book. So it's funny, my family has read it and they would text me the whole time while reading it because they recognized all little bits that are kind of autobiographical that fill out the story. And that's always fun. So for me, it was those couple of things coming together. And then of course, other issues, like I always want to explore in middle grade friendship stories. Maddie is going through some turmoil with her best friend. We're best friends kind of growing up a little faster than Maddie is, and Maddie doesn't know how to handle it. I felt that way a lot in middle school. I had a hard time knowing if someone wanted to be my friend, if they really liked me, if they would then turn around and do something mean the next week. I didn't know how to handle it. So I like to explore that kind of friendship theme as well at this age of reader, because it's something that's really important in your life when you're a kid. What's interesting is I was always a big reader. I always had books with me. My mom used to take me to the Benjamin Branch Public Library in Greensboro in North Carolina, and we were there at least twice a week. And I would come out with a stack of books. And I loved going and just looking on the shelves and seeing if there was a new book from authors that I loved. So I read a lot as a kid, but I didn't ever really had an aspiration to write stories. I spent most of my time drawing. And I was really attracted to being creative and making things with my hands, painting, drawing, and pencil. And so I actually ended up pursuing that as a career. When I went to college, I became a product designer, which a lot of people don't know what that is. But if you've ever been in Target or Walmart and you've seen all the stuff on the shelves, a product designer is the person who designs what those items look like and how they work. So that was interesting to me. I got to draw and work on all kinds of things. I designed blenders, I designed baking pans, toothbrushes, pens, all kinds of things. So I worked in that field for about 10 years, and meanwhile continued to be a very steady reader. And there came a point when I decided my kids were little and I wanted to stay home with them and spend a little time with them while they were little. So I quit my very time-intensive job and decided to stay home. And that's when we moved to South Orange. We bought a little house here and settled in and just really enjoyed being a mom for a couple of years. But I was bored during that time. I had this creative energy. And one day I woke up with the idea for a story. And I said, you know what? If I was writing that, I would start it like this. And then I said, yeah, you know what? I have Word on my computer. I'm going to write it down. And like 2 weeks later, I told my husband, I think I'm writing a book. And he was like, sure you are. Because I just kind of do things creatively. That first book was terrible because usually the first time you try something, you're not too great at it. And that was the same for me. So I wrote a couple of books, kind of my training wheels, learning how to write, really started paying attention to the craft of writing more, which I think was really helped by having a lifetime of reading behind me. Counting Time was the third book that I wrote, and it was the first one that was ready to turn into something more and be published, but it still took me 9 drafts before I got to what ended up being published. So it's funny because I never really said, oh, I want to be a writer when I grow up, but looking back now, I can see all the signs that I was interested in creating and telling stories. And so it feels kind of natural that that's the phase of my life that I'm in now. And I very much enjoy getting to write stories for readers. When I was reading when I was a kid, there were a few subjects that I loved. Anything with horses. So I read every book that was in the extended Black Beauty series. Anything that had a horse on the cover, I was going to read that several times. I spent most of my time drawing horses too. I also really liked kind of mysteries that were short. So there's an Alfred Hitchcock series called The Three Investigators. And I read every single book in that series. I think there were like 30 something books in it. And funny thing is, I used to go into the library every week and check to see if there was a new book in this series, but he had already passed away. So there weren't going to be any new books, but I didn't know as a kid. I just went in and checked every week to see if there was a new one. But I loved reading those books and I often reread them. That's something I do now. I like to reread something that I really enjoyed because it feels like I'm home and it feels comfortable and happy to revisit a story that really engaged me. Other than horses and some of these mystery kind of books, it was funny because I would pick up stuff that I once brought home a collection of O. Henry poems. And I just loved that the book was like this thick. And I said to my mom, can I bring this giant book home? And she was like, sure. She always supported me reading whatever I wanted to read. And I read most of it. I really found that I loved reading these short stories and poems. So I was a pretty adventurous reader. I was definitely that kid in the library that would kind of wander around and check out different things. And my librarian would always suggest stuff to me. She would usually have some books there and be like, hey, I was thinking you should read these. And I would read whatever she suggested that I read. So I was a very adventurous reader as well. South Orange and Maplewood, these towns have been, when we moved here, we didn't know very much about New Jersey. We've been here for, I think, almost 11 years now. We now live in Tuxedo Park in South Orange, which is a wonderful neighborhood. And what we found here was a real sense of community. And I love that so many people here are readers and are really interested in books. It's fun to have other people to talk about books that you love with. I have an amazing book club called the Novel Bites that I've been a part of for, I think it's 7 years now. It might even be going on 8 years. And all of our members are from Maplewood and South Orange, and we meet once a month now on Zoom to talk about our women's fiction title that we would read. And so I found being a part of this community has been really something that fostered writing for me, because this is a very literary community. I helped start and organize the MAPSO Book Festival that's been happening in June the last few years. Unfortunately, couldn't happen this year, but we'll be back in 2021. And seeing that come to life, and our community embrace it fully from the very first year, and all fill out all of the panels and be there to listen to all these authors was super exciting. So for me, it's a great place to live and to write from. And I always enjoy it when I run into other neighbors or I talk with other people about writing here. I encourage everyone to write. I think it's something that, if you look at history, humans have long tried to record our experiences in one form or another. And I think it's valuable. Whenever someone tells me, I've been thinking about writing something, I tell them to go for it. Even if it's just writing a journal every night for a few minutes. Farmers used to do that. They used to just account for the weather and what fields they worked on and any funny things that happened. I think it's a lovely way to kind of foster really engaging with your experience in life and reflecting on it. So for me, I'm looking forward to when my library can be open again, so I can work in my second office. But I know that's going to be a while. For now, we've set up some neighborhood lending. I've had my library, which you see behind me. These are just my young adult and middle grade titles. It's been very busy. So neighbors let me know what they need, and I just leave a book out on my front steps, and then they come and get it. But it's been nice to live in an area where even when our library is closed, we're still sharing about books, we're excited about them, and we're reading them. Because for me as a reader, that's my goal. Writing a story is just to write something that someone would enjoy reading. So I really love living here with all these people who also enjoy reading.